If your church wants to begin to teach people God's way of handling money, there's 4 things you need to do. Model it, preach it, teach it, and celebrate it. Model it, preach it, teach it, and celebrate it. Church leadership needs to model handling money God's way. A few years ago, a California accounting firm did tax returns for 66 pastors, and how many of those do you think were tithing, giving 10%? Give up 4. 4 out of 66 pastors were tithing. It's impossible to preach out of the passion of experience if we're not doing it ourselves. Now, I'm not saying the pastor has to have his finances in perfect order. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is this. The pastor needs to know what God says about handling money, and the pastor needs to be on the journey of applying it. Modeling is the most powerful thing you can do to influence your church. There's modeling it, and then there's preaching it. Now, when you think about preaching, there's an overarching principle here. We need to do something for the congregation before we ask something from them. Do something for them before asking something from them. And when it comes to money, that means the pastor needs to preach on just all the practical things that the Bible says about money, how to work God's way, spend wisely, save, get out of debt, invest, give. We should preach on everything. And when we do preach about giving, and it's key that you do, I want you to listen very, very carefully to me. Don't always link preaching on giving with an ask. Sometimes break that habit. When you preach on giving, don't ask them to give to the church. If you always ask, soon they'll begin to think, the church is just after my money, and they'll tune you out. So remember, model it, preach it, and the next is to teach it. Teach it's done year-round, usually by lay people, and frankly, this is where Compass can help you the most. The Lord allowed me to found Crown Ministries, and in 2000 we merged with Larry Burkett's ministry to form Crown Financial Ministries. And during my tenure as CEO, the Lord enabled us to teach about 50 million people in 88 countries. And then in 2009, I transitioned from Crown to start Compass so we could focus primarily on serving the church, primarily using a very proven, effective small group study. So model it, preach it, teach it, and the 4th thing to do is to celebrate it. What you celebrate will be repeated. So you intentionally celebrate behavior that you want to become part of the fabric, part of the DNA of the church. For example, let's say money's given to fund a short-term mission trip that can be taken so a church can be built among the poor. Well, when they return, interview some of the folks who went on the trip. Share a brief video of the trip. Then lean over the pulpit and say, I want to thank those of you who helped fund this trip. There are going to be people in heaven for all eternity because of your generosity. What have you done? You celebrated generosity. It's becoming more and more part of your church. So let's review. You've got to model it, preach it, teach it, and finally, celebrate it. Well, there you have it, and feel free to contact us if we can serve you in any way.